Welcome to day 143 of 66 and 26. It's Wednesday, which is Wisdom Literature Day in our journey to read through all 66 books of the Bible. And so we're back in the book of Psalms. We took a break from the Psalms to read through Job for a while, just to break up the length of the Psalms. And we're back in Psalm 51 to 55 today. One of the things I want to start with is pointing out a little bit of information about what is known as the superscription to the Psalms. You'll notice in a lot of the Psalms, and all of them from today, Psalms 51 to 55, have an example of this. Before verse 1 of each Psalm, there is a description. In the case of Psalm 51, for the director of music, a psalm of David, when the prophet Nathan came to him after David had committed adultery with Bathsheba. Now, I often point out to people when they're reading through the Bible in the Old Testament and New Testament, there are places where there are added headings in the Bible. I'm going to pick tomorrow's reading from Ezekiel chapter 12, just to give an example. And if you were to open your Bible to Ezekiel 12, you'll see something in my Bible. It has a heading above the chapter that says, the exile symbolized. What I often tell people is that those headings, for the most part throughout the Bible, are commentary by the translators of the Bible. They're not original text. And so mine says the exile symbolized. Your Bible may say something a little bit different than that, but it's a way that we're able to quickly find certain sections of the Bible and understand what that particular section is about, but it's not part of the original text. And so it's a commentary, if you will, very much like the chapter numbers and the verse numbers themselves. Those were not original to the text when the Bible was written, but were added centuries after the writing of the New Testament, so that we could easily find those sections of the Bible that we want to look for and can easily reference them when talking to others about them. Well, in the case of Ezekiel, as with most of the rest of the Bible, those headings are not original to the text. On the other hand, when you're in the Psalms, these are descriptions that were original to the Hebrew Bible. In fact, in the Hebrew Bible, unlike our English translation, those superscriptions are considered verse 1 of each psalm. So whenever there is a superscription like that, it is considered verse 1, and then verse 1 in our English translation is usually included in that verse as well, and then verse 2, verse 3, and so on. So you see in each of the psalms that we have today that kind of description. Psalm 52, there's a description for the director of music, a maskil of David. What is a maskil? Well, we would all like to know that. It's not clear. Biblical scholars have quite a bit of debate about what some of these expressions mean, a maskil, or sometimes you'll see the word Selah in right after Psalm 52 verse 3. There at the far right side of that line, there is the word Selah in italics, and there's debate about what that means. Is that a place where you're supposed to take a breath or change key signature or something like that when it was set to music? We're not quite sure. A maskil, the best explanation I've heard is that this is a especially well-crafted psalm, an artistic psalm that is especially beautiful and artistic in its qualities. Don't know if that's exactly what it means, but whatever it is, it's a description that would have been well known to the people of Israel in the Old Testament times around David and the other kings of Israel. As far as content for today, we see a couple of familiar psalms, especially Psalm 51, which is, as I described, David's prayer to God after he had committed adultery with Bathsheba, and the prophet Nathan came to him and confronted him about his sin. And David, so broken as he was, cried out to the Lord that he would have compassion on him, not treat him for his sin, but have mercy and blot out all his iniquities, create in him a clean heart, a pure heart, willing to follow the Lord instead of following his own ways. So we know that psalm. Also Psalm 53, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And so some really great expressions of faith, and in particular in these 5 psalms we're looking at today, an expression of dependence on God, whether that's dependence on God for forgiveness in the case of David, or needing God's help against the enemies that face against us. Whatever it is, these psalms in particular today cry out in dependence on God. May we always do that as well, cry out to God in knowing that we depend on him for life, forgiveness, and salvation.